Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder and this is BRN AM for Tuesday, September 17th, 2019. Here are your headlines. It's Technology Tuesday. We're going to be talking Robo Advice. Is there a digital revolution occurring in retirement? And do you know who is a fiduciary? In our first segment, we're going to be talking about the digital revolution in retirement. And joining me from Las Vegas, Nevada, Dan Kline. He's a technology and consumer products reporter with the Motley. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. You're the avid traveler for work. Where might you be this week?
I'm joining you from a hotel room in Las Vegas where I'm here for Grocery Shop, a trade show that covers all the sort of technology around the grocery industry.
Great. So have you been attending Grocery Shop on a regular basis? What types of things are going to be discussed just before we kind of get into our subject matter?
So this is actually a new show, but it's an offshoot of a couple of other shows I've been to many times. So it's all of the things you hear about in the media, how groceries are getting to you from the store, supply chain, how they get to the store, which technologies companies are using. And it's a really interesting time where companies kind of have to make some big bets.
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm glad you could join us for this Technology Tuesday. One of the things that is often talked about, and I want to get your definition on this, is the word fintech. And some of our audience may not be familiar with that term. Would you mind just taking a minute or so and just describing what fintech is?
So fintech is sort of the technology attempts to disrupt how money has traditionally worked. So let's pretend you and I went to dinner and you Venmo or PayPal or Zelle or some other method send me the money. That's disrupting what traditionally happened. Now, we don't know what happens when you send that to me. Maybe the credit card company sends a person to the bank who brings the $8 that I sent you, but probably not. It's probably electronic and disruptive. And that's sort of broadly what fintech is. And there's an awful lot of that being discussed here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned at the top of the segment about the focus on retail. Obviously, there is I don't want to use the term, but I'll use it anyway, revolution in digital when it comes to retail. Many of our viewers know about Amazon, Walmart. But would you say the same thing applies in the savings and retirement space?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's all sorts of new tools. There's all sorts of different ways to plan and figure out what you're going to retire with and how you're going to get there. So as a consumer, you're much more empowered than you ever were. I, for example, use an app that just sets money aside into an IRA every week. And I was using that app for something else, and it's an added feature. So there's all sorts of little things you can do to sort of turbocharge your retirement. And you should really just start looking out there and seeing what they are, because we all know that automated payment is easier to make than taking the money and moving it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that is often talked about is the concept of Robo Advisor. Do you have a sense for what that means, just generally?
So I do, and I work for a company full of actual advisors. So, look, yes, a robo-advisor can help you, but the reality is that there are hundreds of thousands of qualified people who can help you, but most importantly, you should help yourself. When you look at everything that's out there, read about it. Know what you're doing. When you're investing or saving for retirement, don't put your money someplace where you haven't done all the homework. It's something I always talk about with my wife. It amazes me when people show up on vacation and they don't know where everything is at the resort. They haven't done all of the work. So, I've done this show from cruise ships, and people get in the cruise ship and they're not even sure where they're going. And that's amazing to me. If it's your money and you're going to invest it in a company, make sure you know everything you can about that company and then talk to advisors, maybe not robo-advisors.
So you made a comment, and I'm really curious. People get on a cruise ship and they don't know where it's going?
I'm teasing a little bit, but they get on a cruise ship and they don't know anything about how it works. They're always upset about the things that cost extra, and they go to, get a drink and don't realize that's not included on most cruise ships. So those are the things that you as a person have the ability to take an active role in your own retirement. Don't assume the government's going to do it. Don't assume your company's going to do it. Know what you have. There's a million articles out there, many by my Motley Fool colleagues, that tell you here are different paths for what you need at different ages. Figure out where that is. Do the triage. Am I going to retire at 65 but move someplace cheaper? So that means I don't need as much money as I have now. Am I going to maintain my current lifestyle? Answer those questions as best you can and check often. Do your homework. Keep reading. The rules change.
Absolutely. The robo-advice market is expected by one account to be over $1.5 trillion by 2023. But it seems like your thesis is that you can have a mix. You can have a human being, but you can also have some technology, and understanding what those services are, but also what those costs may be, could be very important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a small amount of money every week that goes into what I would consider a robo-advisor account. I set the parameters for my portfolio. This is my age, this is what I want. And I honestly don't know. It's funds, not individual stocks. I don't know exactly what I own because I'm not that concerned with that tiny piece of money. But the bulk of what I'm doing for retirement, I actively think about. I have a colleague who manages some of my money, who's a close friend and knows what I'm interested in, so he would never bring to me a company to invest in that wasn't in my wheelhouse and something, obviously your average person doesn't spend their day reading quarterly reports or even annual reports. I do, and you can too. If you're going to spend your money on buying shares of whatever company you like, maybe figure out if that company is making good financial decisions behind the scenes rather than just good front of line stuff that you like.
Well, Dan, always really important information. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy grocery shop. We look forward to learning more technology information next week. Take care. We'll talk to you very soon, my friend.
We'll talk to you then.
And when we come back, do you know the definition of a fiduciary? Stay tuned. Kevin Walsh from Groom Law Group will be joining us to discuss this and more right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. Glad you could stick around. You know, a fiduciary duty is one of the highest duties under the law. But do you know the definition of a fiduciary? And who is a fiduciary of a retirement plan? Well, joining me in this Morning Pulse Academy segment, Kevin Walsh from Groom Law. We discussed this and a lot more, so check it out. very pleased to welcome back to the program Mr. Kevin Walsh of Groom Law Group. Kevin, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on again. I'm glad we got through a couple takes of you because we might need a couple takes of me this week.
I highly doubt that. You are always on point. So what's top of mind for you and your colleagues at Groom Law?
So I thought this week it makes some sense to frame kind of who's a fiduciary. And it's really an important kind of fundamental building block of figuring out kind of how ERISA works or what standard of care is owed. And at a basic level, it seems pretty straightforward, but it's still an evolving discussion. So under ERISA, there's really kind of three ways you can be a fiduciary. One is if you have authority or control over kind of the administration of a plan or its assets. The second way is if you provide investment advice for a fee, direct or indirect. And the third way is if you have essentially discretion over how a plan operates. So kind of prongs 1 and 3 seem fairly straightforward where you're a fiduciary if you're making decisions, if you're the ultimate decision maker about kind of what a plan means, what a plan should do with its money, whether someone's entitled to benefits. The second prong, really providing investment advice for a fee, direct or indirect. Now, that prong has gotten a crazy amount of attention over the past, and I'd say 6 years, but you could really say 60 years.
Yep.
It goes back really to, when ERISA was enacted.
Studebaker, all those kind of the Studebaker.
You can go pre-ERISA, or you go back to the Advisors Act, really, where an investment advisor provides investment advice. ERISA uses language investment advice for a fee, but even then, you're still not clear: is it supposed to get brokers? Is it supposed to get other entities or individuals who provide advice? Now, if we kind of go back to the beginning, in '75, the Department of Labor released a 5-part test for what investment advice for a fee means. And it included things like it's got to be the primary basis, it's got to be more than just once, and then kind of other factors like where it has to be individualized. And the thought was that, if you meet these 5 factors, then the relationship that you have is a fiduciary relationship. Then over time, they were asked by brokers, well, are brokers included? And they've indicated, brokers can be included under that 5-part test. Fast forward, we get to 2016, and the Department of Labor released a new rule that was designed to make a whole lot more people investment advice fiduciaries. Really broadened the scope, made it kind of a one-time thing, could get you fiduciary status, made it so that even if you didn't realize it was going to be the primary basis for someone, that you can still be a fiduciary without having that understanding that it's going to be the primary basis. Now, here's where things get interesting. The Fifth Circuit killed that rule and said, the Department of Labor has really screwed this up. When you look at who's a fiduciary, salespeople really aren't fiduciaries. So investment advisors are fiduciaries, and when ERISA was enacted in '75, it was understood that investment advisors were common law fiduciaries. On the other hand, at that point, it was also understood that brokers aren't fiduciaries. Now, the Fifth Circuit seemed to think that the 5-part test got to the right point. But if you look at it, there's still some disconnect between the 5-part test said and how it was interpreted by the department, what the Fifth Circuit said, what the department tried to do in 2016. And right now we've got another regulatory process building where it looks like we're going to get a refresh of the fiduciary rule. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the department incorporates these ideas that were put forward by the Fifth Circuit about salespeople might not be fiduciaries, with their kind of stated goal of providing as much investor protection as they can. So I think this is something to watch. And when we think about fiduciary status, if you've got control over a plan, if you've got control over decision making, it's easy to figure out, I'm a fiduciary. The world we live in today, if you're providing recommendations to a plan, if you're saying, here's some things that might be suitable investments. So I think we're hoping to get a lot of clarification from the department sometime this fall.
So regardless of what happens from the department, it really sounds like to me the fiduciary, the actual plan fiduciary, the people responsible for managing the plan assets and oversight of the plan really need to be diligent, regardless of how what this outcome is, understanding the roles of their third parties, whether it's the investment advisor, the broker. They need to be really aware of this so that they can affect their role and responsibilities as plan fiduciaries.
Yeah, I'd agree. If you're in kind of an internal plan fiduciary, it probably makes sense to reach out to your service providers and understand whether they think they're providing services in a fiduciary capacity or a non-fiduciary capacity, or if the function they're performing is just something that can't be fiduciary for that matter.
Well, I guess we're going to find out more as this continues to evolve. Kevin Walsh, always a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic you'd like for us to discuss? Or someone of interest who you think might be able to tell a really awesome story? Drop us a line. And don't forget, check out today's latest news and headlines in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more in today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving. I'm Jeff Snyder, and don't forget, roll with the changes.